Hello there, and thanks for joining me. I'm digital artist Aaron Rutten, and in this video, I'm going to show you some of the basics of using DrawPile. DrawPile is a free open-source, web-based collaborative drawing application which lets people all around the world draw on the same canvas at the same time, and it even works with your Wacom tablet so that you can use your pen pressure to vary your brush opacity or your line width. It has a pretty decent selection of tools and brushes that you can customize, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm going to show you the basics of how to install DrawPile, get it set up, join and create sessions and record sessions, and maybe a few other things. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to do is download DrawPile from drawpile.net, and we'll go to the download page. And I'm using Windows, so I'm going to select Windows. Now, depending on when you download this, you may end up with a different version than what I have here. There is the 2.0 beta out here, and that has a few new features, but for now I'm just going to stick with version 1.0.4. I'm going to go ahead and save that file to my desktop so that I can find it and install it easily. Here it is on my desktop. I'll just double click to install it, click on Run. I'm going to install it in English, but there's some other languages available as well. Click on Next to install, and then pick a place to install, and so on. Once DrawPile is installed, you'll be able to open it. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the DrawPile icon. And here we have the DrawPile interface, which is pretty simple. It's a very minimal interface, which is good because that gives you more room to draw on your canvas. When you first load DrawPile, you'll probably have this chat log down here at the bottom, and if you're not interested in using chat right now, you can just go ahead and drag it from this bar here and hide it. And then if you want to get it back later, you just drag it again back up. We're not going to be using chat for now, so I'm just going to hide it. Right now my canvas is showing full screen. I can control the zoom in a few different ways. One is with this slider down here at the bottom where I can zoom in and I can zoom out of my canvas. I can also go up here to view, and then there's zoom in, zoom out, normal size. You can also see the keyboard shortcuts here. Normal size, we'll just put it to 100%. You can also rotate the canvas using the rotation here. And you can go to view and you can control the rotation here as well. If you want to reset the rotation, you can do that. If you want to move your canvas around, you can hold spacebar and you can drag the position of your canvas if you want to reposition it. Or if you're zoomed in really close and you want to pan around, you can do that. Now let's go ahead and do a little test stroke here on our canvas. We want to make sure that the brush tool is selected. We want to go ahead and select a color. Let's paint a test stroke. You could use your mouse or you can use your tablet. Now when you first install DrawPile, you're not going to have pen pressure activated on your tablet. To activate it, you need to check size, and you can also check opacity if you want to control the opacity as well. So if I check size and opacity, now I can vary my pen pressure to get a thicker or thinner line. I can also draw lightly to get a more transparent stroke, and if I press down firm, I'll get a more opaque stroke. One of the good things about DrawPile is a lot of the shortcuts in DrawPile are the same shortcuts as other applications. For example, I can do Control-Z to undo. Now let's customize our color palette a little bit. Right now we're seeing these swatches, which is fine if you like to paint with swatches. You can change those colors here. But for me personally, I prefer this mode here where I get the cube that has value and then saturation, and it has the hue ring around it. We can also customize our brushes up here. We can control the size of the brush, the opacity of the brush, the hardness or softness of a brush. We can control the spacing between each segment of the brush. So if I wanted a more dotted pattern, I could increase the spacing, or I can decrease it if I want it to be a solid line with no gaps. I can control the blend mode of the strokes as well. For example, I'm going to put down some paint with the normal blend mode, and that's just your normal basic opaque paint that's going to cover everything. But if I set this to multiply now, it's going to react more like a marker would. So if I select yellow, imagine we're coloring with markers here. We're coloring on the white part of the canvas, and then when we go over the blue, it turns kind of a dark greenish color. If I change this from multiply to normal, and I paint with that same color, it's just covering it up. So you could think of this blend mode here as being the kind of paint or the medium that you're painting with. You'll have to experiment with these a little bit to see what they do. Now all of these changes that you make to the brush as far as the color and all of these settings here are getting applied to this particular slot in your 1 of 5 brush presets. And these don't just have to be brushes, these could be tools as well. So whatever I leave this set at, it will remain at. I can click over here on the next preset slot, and I have an entirely different brush that I can draw with. This is my airbrush here, and typically I want to use this with a larger brush size. A good way to increase your brush size is to use the bracket keys, so I'm going to hold down the right bracket key. Or I can go ahead and drag the size up over here. And now I have my soft edge brush that I can use as an airbrush. I can reduce the opacity if I want. Then I can kind of build up my color like so, gradually. So I've got my airbrush, I've got my hard edge brush. Maybe I want another brush here. Maybe I want this to be one of the watercolor brushes. I'm going to select the watercolor brush. That changes that third slot to a watercolor brush. And the watercolor brushes, I don't know if there's so much watercolor, but they do kind of blend into the canvas. So you can see here, I'm painting strokes, but they're kind of fading out. But it's also blending. If I hold down and I keep painting, then I'm kind of smudging everything around and it's working as a blender. So you can go between smudging and blending here with the smudging control. I can turn smudging way up, opacity way down, and then I have something that's going to work more like a blender and isn't really going to add paint. So I can really soften the edges here and get a pretty nice blending effect. So I have my blender, and then if I want to add a tool over here, maybe I want that to be set to an eraser so that I can erase. And then of course I can control all of the brush controls for the eraser as well, including opacity and size. And then I have my fifth slot here, which I could assign to another tool. Maybe I'll assign this to the line tool. You can easily draw shapes and lines. So if I wanted to draw some guides for a building, I could do that. I can draw rectangles, and I can draw ellipses, and I can also use the paint bucket to fill areas of the canvas. You have control over the tolerance and the expansion here. So the tolerance and the expansion will bring your paint in closer to the edge. Now I'll just quickly go over some of the other tools. We have the pencil here, which is basically just a 1 pixel brush. I don't really like this particular brush, but it might be good for sketching and drawing little hair. And we have a new document if you want to create a new composition. We have open and save if you want to open or save your compositions. We have undo and redo. We have cut layer, copy layer, paste layer. We can also add text or annotations. We can sample color with our color picker, which is the color dropper in some other applications. And it's helpful to note that while you're painting, you can also hold down Control to invoke that color picker. That way you don't have to select it up here. That makes it really handy. You can just pick your color, paint, pick another color, paint, and so on, and it makes it really quick and easy to get a color. Next to the color picker is the laser pointer, and I don't know if I really get the laser pointer. I guess it's just kind of a way to select a particular area without drawing on it to draw people's attention to that area. So I could say like right around here, I want you to look at this yellow area, then people would see that. Or I could write something temporarily. I could say hi, and then it disappears. I can transform areas by dragging a selection, and then I can scale it down, move it around. I can flip it, and I can mirror it. I can reset the size if I want. If I want a little more control over the areas that I'm selecting, I can use the lasso selection tool. And I could select around this oval shape here, and I can transform that in different ways. Now, what if you want a little more control over the objects in your painting? Well, in that case, you'll want to be using layers. So all the painting I've been doing so far has been on the background layer, all on the same layer. And I've been neglecting my foreground layer. I could have added stuff to the foreground layer. For example, I can select my brush tool, choose a different color, and I'll draw a big X here. Now I can hide and show that layer. And now if I want to move that layer, I'll just select all by doing Control A. You can also go to Edit, Select All. That puts a selection around this whole layer here. And then I can choose my Select tool, and I can just go ahead and move that wherever I want it. I can also scale it up and down. And because it's on its own layer, it's completely independent from all the stuff that's behind it. So I'm happy with my transformation. I'll just click off of the transformation with the transformation tool. That applies that transformation. Then I can continue going in and painting. I can select that layer, and again, I can move it. And what I just painted is only on that layer. It's not affecting the background behind it. If I want to create a new layer, I can right-click in the Layers palette, and I can insert a layer, or I can click on this little tab here, and I can choose New. I can double-click on the layer to name it. I can call that layer New Layer. And then if I wanted to, I could paint on that layer. I'll do a white X this time. And I can take that layer and move that around. If I want to quickly get rid of this layer, I can clear the contents of the layer without actually deleting the layer itself by choosing Edit, select all, and then I can hit delete on my keyboard to clear that layer. And I'll need to deselect my selection by going to Edit, Deselect, or I can hit Control-Shift-A on my keyboard. I'm going to do that on the background as well. I'm going to hit Control-A to select all, hit delete to clear it, Control-Shift-A to clear that selection. I'll select my paint bucket and white, and I'll just go ahead and fill that with white to get rid of that. And rather than paint on the background layer, from now on I'm just going to paint on layers above the background. In fact, if I want to make sure I don't paint on the background at all, I'll go ahead and just click this lock to lock that layer and choose lock this layer. And that way I can't accidentally paint on it. That's going to make sure that when I'm painting now, all the painting I do is always going to have a transparent background. And if I want to change this background color later to something else or get rid of it altogether, I have full control over that. Now let's say we want to delete a layer. I'm going to right click on the layer and choose delete, or I can go to this submenu here and I can choose delete. I can also duplicate layers. So I could take that layer and I could move it over. Now earlier we looked at changing the blend mode of the strokes here to get different paint effects. We can also apply that effect to entire layers. For example, I'm going to go ahead and select yellow here, and I'm going to paint on this layer above the blue, and the yellow covers the blue because it's set to a normal blend mode. If I change that to a multiply blend mode, it blends a little differently, kind of like it would if this were a marker. If I change the blend mode to lighten, then the yellow ends up brightening the blue and it turns it into a white. If I change it back to normal, then it goes back to covering it up again. So feel free to experiment with these to try out all these effects here. If I want to rearrange the order of the layers, I can drag them above or below each other, so I can put the yellow below the blue, or put the blue back below the yellow. And again, I can hide layers. I could hide the yellow layer, or I could hide the blue layer. Next, we'll take a look at how to save our drawings. I'm going to go to Save, and we can save this as a variety of formats. There's the Open Raster format, which works with Krita and MyPaint and other open source art applications. It's worth mentioning that this format does not work with Photoshop and Corel Painter and some of the other more popular paid art applications, so keep that in mind. If you do save as Open Raster, you can always open it in DrawPile and resave it as a different format. You also have Bitmap, JPEG 2000, JPEG, PNG, TIFF, and all files. If you're doing really highly detailed work that you might want to print or sell or do something commercial with later, go ahead and save as TIFF because that's going to be the highest quality format. It's going to be a pretty large file though, so if you want a high quality format that's not too large, you can always go with PNG, which is what I usually use. I know you've heard a lot about JPEG and you always see JPEG everywhere. Everyone wants you to upload a JPEG, but JPEG is actually one of the worst formats you can save as because it's going to compress your art, which will throw away detail and information and color in order to make the file smaller. So only use JPEG if you have to, and make sure that you save your original as either TIFF or PNG first, and then save a copy as a JPEG. So I'm going to save this as a PNG. I'm going to call it DrawPile1, and I'll just save it to a folder. Now the PNG format does not support layers, so if I was worried about saving my layers, I'd want to save it as a TIFF file. Or I could save it as Open Raster while I'm working on it in DrawPile, and then if I need a PNG or a JPEG, I can save a copy. So I'll go ahead and flatten it, that's okay. I don't need my layers. Now you'll notice that it didn't change the open document, it just saved a copy as a PNG, so I didn't lose my layers. And if I need to, I can still save my original. Now let's take a look at pen calibration. If you're interested in calibrating your pen pressure, you can do that here next to the layers under Input, and you can make your own pressure curve. You can right click on this window to go ahead and reset it if you want to remove that point. You can also add smoothing. If I put on a lot of smoothing and I draw a line, it's really going to smooth out that line. So even if it's a little wobbly, it'll still get smoothed out. If I turn smoothing all the way down, then you can see the line comes out really jagged. So most of the time you'll want smoothing to be up if you're doing fine inking and things like that. Down here at the bottom we have the properties bar. Earlier we looked at rotating and zooming the canvas. We also have shortcuts for normal size and for reset rotation. It can be helpful to flip your canvas sometimes by clicking the mirror button. You can also flip it on the other axis. Let's go ahead and look through the menus up here at the top. In the File menu, we have New, Open, Open Recent. This shows you some of the recently opened documents. You can also save if you want to save your current progress, or you can save as if you want to save a copy. You can also turn on autosave if you're worried about your computer crashing and losing work. We can also export animations. We'll take a look at animation a little bit later. We can record our drawing. We'll take a look at that later as well, and then we can quit. Now let's go over to Edit. We have Undo, Redo. We have Cut Layer, Copy Visible, Copy Layer, Paste, Paste from File. then we have select all, deselect. We can resize the canvas to make the canvas and what you've drawn on it larger or smaller. Or if you just want to add room to the canvas without changing the size of what's on the canvas, you can expand the canvas. You can delete empty annotations, delete the layer, delete the contents of a layer. You can fill selections, recolor selections, color erase selections. I'll let you experiment with all these. Let's take a look at preferences. We can control the language here. If your pressure sensitivity is not working, you can make sure that's turned on here. If you're having any problems with crashing or bugs or jagged lines, go ahead and turn this on. There's touch options here if your tablet or your computer supports touch. You can change the autosave interval. Right now it's set to save every 5 seconds. You have a notification volume. You'll get an audible notification for the chat, recording markers, user login and logout, and canvas lock, and you can turn those on or off. We have options for animation, but we'll take a look at that a little bit later. There's options for the network, but you probably won't have to mess with this unless you're an advanced user. You can look up the different shortcuts for all of the commands, and you can even change those shortcuts to custom commands. Known hosts lets you add hosts to a custom list. Hosts are the rooms where you'll be drawing with other people, so if there's a room you want to connect to frequently, you can add that to this list. And list servers we don't need to mess with. So let's go ahead and click on OK. Let's look under the View menu. We have toolbars. We can turn these toolbars on and off. These are the toolbars up at the top. We also have the docks, which are the palettes that you see on the side. There's a navigator that's not enabled. If you wanted to take that and move that out and resize it, you could do that, and the navigator lets you navigate around your canvas. And that goes for any of these palettes. You can move any of these out and arrange them wherever you want. If you want to dock the color over here, you can do that. If you want to change the color to this mode here and move these brushes over here and dock them, and then switch between tabs like this, you can do that. And you can, of course, close the palettes if you don't want to see them anymore, and they're always accessible back under the View menu, and then Docks. The chat you can show and hide easily with a keyboard shortcut if you want. If we were working on an animation and we wanted to quickly flip between all of our layers, we could use the flip book here. And it's cycling through all 3 of my layers really quickly here. I could change the speed of that if I wanted to. But as I mentioned earlier, we'll look at animation in more detail a little bit later. You can show the crosshair cursor, which is the cursor that follows your brush. You can show the pixel grid if you want to work with pixel art and zoom in really close and see each pixel individually, you can do that. If you want to save some screen real estate, you can turn on full screen mode with F11. That makes all of your palettes go away, and then you have more room for your canvas. F11 makes it come back. Session lets you join and host drawing sessions for other people to join you and draw, but we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Let's look at tools. Here's all the shortcuts for each of the tools if you want to quickly bring them up. For example, if I want to get to the brush quickly, I can hit B, I can hit E to go to my eraser, I can hit I for my color picker, or I can also hold Control. There's also shortcuts for increasing and decreasing your brush size with the bracket keys, swapping colors, and selecting your layers. Now let's take a look at the Help menu. If there's anything that I didn't cover in this video, you can always go to the home page and check out DrawPile's own help and tutorial sections. Now let's take a look at hosting and joining a session. First of all, I'm going to join a session. I'm going to click on Join. The host address that we want to use is drawpile.net. You can add your username here. You can make that whatever you want. You have an option to record the session if you want. Now, if you already know the session you want to join, you can go to Join. If you want to browse for sessions, then you can go to Find. I'm going to click on Find, and we can see the session window here. These are all the public sessions. Some of them might be locked, but some of them are not locked, which means that you can join them. You can see which ones are locked with a little lock over here. You can see what the name is for that session. You can see how many people are currently painting. You can see who the owner is, and you can see the age or the duration that that session's been going on. So I'm going to choose one of these sessions here that has 11 users and it's not locked. That way there'd be some people drawing there. I'll click on OK. That adds the host address here, and then I'll click on Join to join that session. Now it'll take a minute to load your session, so be patient and just wait. Once you see some drawing happening, you'll know that you're in the session. So you can see there's already people drawing here. I'm going to draw something as well. And right now I'm drawing with people all around the world. These 11 people could be from all kinds of countries. If you want to leave a session, you just go to Session, Leave, and then click on Leave. Now I've disconnected from that session. I can still access the artwork and move it around. If I wanted to save it, I could save it. If I wanted to cut out just my piece of the artwork, I could do that using the Selection tool and then cut with Control X. I could create a new canvas. Of course, I can choose my canvas dimensions here in background color if I want. Click on create, and then I'll just paste. Now I've taken out my piece of artwork from that session. Now when you create a new canvas, it opens a new instance of DrawPile, so I'll have to close this one and close the one behind it. And I'll discard my changes. I'm not worried about saving any of that stuff. And you can see that I've gone back to that third instance, which is the canvas I was drawing on before I joined that other session. So when I joined that other session, it created a new canvas, which was the canvas that the other people were working on before I got there. You don't want to have too many instances of DrawPile open because that might crash your computer. Don't end up creating a bunch of new canvases and then have like 10 DrawPiles open at once. Now, if you want to create your own room or your own session, you can go to Host. You can give your session a title. You can choose your username. And if you want to give it a password, you can give it a password. If you want to make it private for your friends or whoever else, you can do that. If you want it to be public, you want to make sure to not add a password, and you want to make sure that you announce it at drawpile.net. That way people can search it just like we searched earlier for a session. This is how people will find your session. Unless you know what these options do down here, don't mess with the server options. We can go to settings. If you want to specify a limit for the amount of users, you can do that. That might be a good idea because just imagine if you had 60 people trying to draw on the same canvas, it would start to get really crowded and there wouldn't be much room for people to draw. So I think a good user limit is about 10 to 20 people, but you can feel free to set that to whatever you want. If you want to make sure that nobody hacks your password and gets into your room and you want it to just be 2 people, set it to 2 people. Now you have some options. You can allow drawing by default. You can lock layer controls if you don't want people messing around with your layers. Persistent session will just keep the session going. Even if everybody leaves, it'll stay going. And preserve chat will save your chat. Let's go ahead and go back to session, make sure all this looks okay. And I'll go ahead and host. And I'm hosting this session here with this particular canvas that I've already started drawing on. Now, if you wanted to start fresh, you would of course want to start with a blank layer. I can always go in and just select this stuff and delete it just to get rid of it. And because this is just a demonstration, I'm not going to wait around for someone to join the session. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on leave. There's also some controls in session for locking the board. You can also lock the layer controls or unlock them, deny joins, and change title. Now let's take a look at recording a session. I'm going to go to File, Record. I'm going to give this file a name. I'm just going to call this Test. Let's click on Save. And as soon as I start drawing, it's recording what I'm doing. So maybe I'll draw this shape here. This will be some kind of snake or something. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to the background layer and I'll add some color to this. Now I've gone ahead and painted around all the edges because it's a lot easier just to select the paint bucket and fill in that center area rather than trying to color it in manually. And I'll change my color and add some color to the inside of the mouth here. And I'll call that a finished drawing. I'm going to go to File, Stop Recording. Then I'm going to go to that folder that I saved the file to and open up the DrawPile file. This gives me the playback console, and I can control the playback and the playback speed. I'm going to crank this dial up to speed up the playback. And I went ahead and recorded some of what I was drawing before I drew the snake, so it's playing that back. You can see the playhead going forward. You can add markers, you can remove undos and different things. It's a pretty cool little program. So there's the snake that I drew earlier. Here's me filling it in. And once it's done playing, we can save this as a video. We'll go to Export Video. You want to change this to video. You'll need FFmpeg installed. If that's not installed, you'll want to go ahead and look up the instructions for that available on the DrawPile tutorials website. You can also set your frame rate, the video size, the format, the quality, the audio encoding format, and the video quality. I'll click OK, and then if I want to, I can export that as a video. So that's a good quick way to make speed paintings without having to do much editing. Now you can also make frame-based animation and you can export it as a series of images. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and merge my snake layers here. I'm going to right-click on the layer 1, which is the line work, and I'm going to choose Merge Down. Now these layers are 1. I'm going to duplicate that layer so that I have 5 duplicates, and I'll name those layers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go to the 2 layer, and I'm going to do a really simple animation here. I'm going to hide layer 1, 3, 4, and 5 so I can just focus on 2. That'll let me see what I'm doing here, and I'm just going to erase these pupils. And I'll just draw those in a different position. And if I want to export this as a frame animation, I'll go to File, Export Animation, choose Image Series. You can choose which layers you want to export. I want layers 1 through 5. The background layer is the bottom layer. You can choose the background. Do you want that to be the bottom layer, a solid color, or transparent? Let's just say the bottom layer can be the background. We can choose our frame rate and our size, and we can choose our format. I prefer ping. I'm going to click on OK. We'll choose a folder to export those to. I'll choose select folder. It's going to export each of these layers as frames. And then if I go to that folder and I open up that file, and I toggle through this, you can see I have my simple animation. So I know that's not a super detailed tutorial on animation, but honestly, I wouldn't really use this application for animation. I use it for collaborative drawing. And I do want to mention that you're not limited to just drawing with people around the world. You can connect multiple computers together in the same house or the same room, and you can draw together on the same canvas with your friends in real life. So there you go. That's an overview of the basics of using DrawPile. I do occasionally host DrawPile sessions on my YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe if you want to get a notification next time I do that. And if you found this information helpful, take a quick second to click the like button. I'd like to thank the folks who support my channel on patreon.com/AaronRutton for making this video possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.